The relentless sun scorched the pavement, transforming even the simplest errands into feats of endurance. At Brickstone Mart, one quiet aisle away from the hum of checkout scanners, a single moment was about to ignite a chain of events no bystander would ever forget. Sasha, sporting a bright turquoise cast on her arm, glared unflinchingly at a towering man in a leather jacket clutching a stolen bracelet. His sneer threatened violence, but she refused to back down, refused to let him waltz out with what didn't belong to him. Suddenly, Vin Diesel and Dwayne Johnson stepped out from behind the shelf of soda cans, sensing danger in the thick summer air. In that instant, lines were drawn. A fearless young girl who spoke up for what was right, and two Hollywood powerhouses determined to protect her at all costs. Yet neither Sasha nor her unexpected allies realized just how far certain men would go to salvage their bruised pride. As boiling heat shimmered off the roads outside, a far fiercer storm gathered inside the store, a storm that would lead to an unforgettable confrontation of raw courage and moral resolve. Curious to see how one fearless stand can unleash an epic showdown? Don't miss a second. Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in a moment like this? The late afternoon sun hammered down on Riverton City with unrelenting heat, warping the pavement with shimmering heat waves and testing the patience of anyone brave enough to be outside. Two men, both drenched in sweat from an intense workout, trudged across a nearly deserted parking lot toward a modest shopping center. Leading the way was Dwayne Johnson, clad in a loose-fitting tank top that revealed bulging arms and a commanding physique. At his side, equally formidable yet slightly leaner, strode Vin Diesel, his shaved head reflecting the sun's glare. Both were well-known figures, Hollywood action stars whose on-screen feats had captivated millions. Yet on this day, all they wanted was a quick escape from the oppressive weather, perhaps a cold drink and a momentary respite in the store's air-conditioned aisles. As they approached the entrance to Brickstone Mart, the automatic doors slid open, releasing a much-coveted blast of cool air that caressed their sun-heated skin. Dwayne let out a grateful sigh. "Man, I needed that," he muttered, rolling his shoulders to loosen them. Vin grinned, scanning the rows of shelves that stretched out before them under fluorescent lighting. "Let's head straight for the fridges in the back," he suggested, glancing at the overhead signs indicating snack foods, beverages, and produce. Usually a simple pit stop like this wouldn't register as anything noteworthy, but fate had other plans. Somewhere in the labyrinth of aisles, trouble was brewing, the kind of trouble that demanded more than just casual bystanders to resolve. They'd barely made it 5 steps when a piercing voice sliced through the hum of the store. "Sir, put that back!" The words rang out with such commanding authority that a hush fell around them. Dwayne and Vin traded quizzical looks before pivoting in the direction of the sound. They spotted a cluster of shoppers paused in mid-motion, some with half-filled baskets, others craning their necks to see what the commotion was. Near the corner of the electronics section, a young black girl, her left arm in a bright turquoise cast, stood resolutely before a towering man in worn leather with a shaved head and a scowl that radiated aggression. Even from a distance, the tension was palpable, a current electrifying the air. The man was gripping a glimmering gold bracelet studded with diamond chips, an item that clearly didn't belong to him. "I saw you sneak that under your jacket," the girl declared, unwavering despite the difference in height and intimidation factor. "You were heading for the exit without paying." A few onlookers turned to each other, shock rippling through the small crowd. The store's cashier, a young woman named Trina, hovered behind the counter, wide-eyed, as though debating whether to intervene or to call security. The bald man's face contorted with anger. He shot a venomous glare at the girl, who refused to budge an inch. "Mind your own business," he growled, voice thick with menace. "You got no idea who you're messing with." One step closer to the girl, and it was clear his next move could escalate into violence. At that moment, Dwayne's protective instinct flared. He and Vin started forward, the sinews in their powerful frames taut with readiness. They had seen enough scripted fights in film, but this was real. No cameras, no director, just a genuine threat playing out in a small store under flickering fluorescent bulbs. The tension ratcheted up a notch when the bald man tightened his hold on the stolen bracelet. the gold reflecting overhead lights like a twisted halo. A shaky hush gripped the store as if everyone present collectively held their breath. Sasha, the black girl in the turquoise cast, squared her shoulders. There was fear in her eyes. Anyone could see that. But more prominent was an unwavering resolve. Stealing is wrong, she repeated, enunciating each word carefully. And I'm not just going to let you walk out of here. By now, phone cameras appeared in the hands of 2 or 3 bystanders who must have realized something dramatic was unfolding. The store's modest security staff, one older guard with a potbelly who seemed ill-prepared for real conflict, stood off to the side, hesitant about engaging a man who exuded aggression like a rancid odor. Every so often, the guard lifted a walkie-talkie, but no backup seemed forthcoming. The man's gaze flicked around the small circle of watchers, returning to Sasha with a scornful twist of his lips. "You think you're the law?" he sneered. "I was gonna buy it. Maybe I changed my mind now that you're flapping your mouth." Sasha's cast was tucked close to her torso, as though subconsciously guarding an injury she'd already sustained. But her voice carried unwavering conviction. "Lies don't make you any less of a thief," she retorted. That did it. A vein pulsed in the man's temple. He raised an arm, likely aiming to strike her, or at least scare her into submission. That's when Dwayne Johnson lunged, intercepting the blow with a powerful block that echoed through the store. The bald man stumbled back, genuine surprise flashing across his features. Before he could react further, Vin Diesel appeared beside Dwayne, forming a formidable wall of muscle. The crowd let out small gasps of relief, as if they'd collectively realized these men could handle themselves and handle him. For a heartbeat, the biker reevaluated the situation. The phone cameras, the store manager now frantically beckoning for real security, and 2 colossal men staring him down. His chest heaved with suppressed rage, but caution flickered in his eyes. "And who the hell do you think you are?" he spat, voice trembling with embarrassment at being thwarted by a teenage girl and 2 strangers. He glanced at Sasha, clearly wanting to deliver one last threat. "This isn't over, kid," he hissed. "Mark my words." Dwayne's face was carved from stone, fierce yet calm. "You'd better walk away now," he warned, voice so deep it seemed to reverberate off the shelves. With a venomous glare, the man tossed the gold bracelet onto a nearby display rack, stomping toward the exit. As he passed Sasha, his lip curled in a snarl. "We'll meet again," he snarled quietly, the vow dripping with menace. The next second, he shoved open the sliding doors, disappearing into the blazing sunlight. For a few moments, the store remained caught in a muted hush, everyone processing how close they had come to witnessing or experiencing real violence. Trina, the cashier, dabbed sweat from her brow with trembling fingers. The older security guard exhaled, finally lowering his walkie-talkie. Gradually, people resumed their shopping, although many took fleeting glances at Sasha, Dwayne, and Vin, as though they'd stepped out of a real-life action scene. Sasha exhaled shakily, her brash courage giving way to a surge of relief. She turned to face the 2 men who had come to her defense, a small grin tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Thanks," she murmured, readjusting the cast on her arm. "I didn't want him to just walk out with it. Guess that was risky." Vin Diesel's shoulders visibly relaxed, but the tension of the confrontation still lingered in his eyes. "Risky, maybe," he said, glancing at Sasha's turquoise cast, "but brave. You shouldn't have to handle that alone." He let a wave of empathy settle over him. The girl was no older than 14 or 15, yet her resolve in calling out wrongdoing dwarfed what most adults might muster. Meanwhile, Dwayne Johnson nodded in agreement, a faint note of paternal protectiveness coloring his tone. "You okay, though? He didn't hurt you before we got here?" Sasha shook her head. "I'm fine," she assured them, leaning her weight slightly away from her injured arm. "Just had a basketball accident a few weeks back. Someone spilled water on the court, and I slipped. Landed all wrong." She paused, noticing the store manager creeping over, eyes darting between the group. "Thank you," the manager said in a shaky voice. "I've never seen anyone stand up to him like that. He's caused issues before, little shoplifting here and there, but never so openly. We usually can't do much because our security's limited." That revelation sent a chill through both Dwayne and Vin. If the man had been trouble previously, but never fully confronted, he might feel he owned the place, free to intimidate employees and customers. Sasha frowned. He left, but what if he comes back? She asked quietly. I'm not scared, just maybe it's not safe here. Dwayne cast a quick glance at Vin, a question in his eyes. Should they do more? But Vin exhaled slowly, turning to the store manager. We'll make sure she's all right. Maybe walk her to wherever she's going. The manager nodded gratefully, and after a few half-formed words of thanks, slunk off to speak with security, presumably about reviewing camera footage. The hush that had settled during the confrontation lifted slightly as customers returned to their tasks, albeit with subdued caution. The beep of checkout scanners resumed, and overhead announcements about sale items once again played over the store's PA system. Sasha clutched a bottle of cold soda from the drink cooler, her original reason for visiting. She smiled faintly, glancing at Dwayne and Vin with unmasked admiration. You guys are amazing. You didn't even hesitate. Her voice carried a youthful sincerity that glowed through the tension. Dwayne shrugged. Well, we saw a bully, and we're not fans of those. Meanwhile, Vin gave a small nod. We've both met enough people who think they can push around anyone smaller. Not with us around. The conversation was cut short by the manager's timid approach. She held out the gold bracelet, now properly bagged for evidence. He really was trying to steal it, she confirmed, somewhat breathless. It's a fancy piece, worth hundreds at least. I'll hold it in the back until the police get here. She eyed the door as though half expecting the biker to barge back in any second. Look, if you two wouldn't mind giving a statement to the cops when they arrive, it'd help a lot. Dwayne and Vin nodded, willing to do their part, but Sasha shook her head politely. I can't stay. My mom's expecting me at home. It's just me and her. She'll worry if I'm late. Dwayne's brow furrowed. Tell you what, he said, voice calm. We'll get you safely home, then we'll come back here to talk to the police. Sasha blinked at the gesture but flashed a grateful smile. Deal, she said. It's only a few blocks away. I usually walk. She seemed insistent that she could handle herself, but the memory of the biker's final words, this isn't over, hung in the air like a dark, unspoken promise. A wave of discomfort flickered across her face, though she tried to mask it. The store's gentle hum enveloped them again, but the underlying sense of foreboding remained. It was as though the heat outside mirrored the tense environment within, and the residue of that confrontation left them all uneasy. The trio exited Brickstone Mart together, stepping into the staggering, oven-like air of mid-afternoon Riverton. The asphalt radiated heat that felt like an invisible wave assaulting their senses. Sasha squinted, adjusting her turquoise cast on one hip, and pointed down a side street. This way, she said, and they began their short trek. Vin Diesel, walking on the right, and Dwayne Johnson on the left, effectively flanked her, as though forming a protective detail. They moved at a leisurely pace, scanning their surroundings for any sign that the biker lurked in the wings. The city block offered typical suburban details, single-story shops, dusty cars parked haphazardly in front of a small laundromat, a bank with tinted glass, and an old pizza parlor that had likely seen better years. Even so, the tension from the store still clung to them. A passing truck slowed as its driver recognized the two muscular men, but some silent exchange in that driver's mind suggested not to pester them for autographs in the scorching heat. After a few minutes, they rounded a corner, approaching a calmer neighborhood. The roars of commerce faded, replaced by the hum of lawnmowers and the occasional bark of a dog behind a chain-link fence. Sasha exhaled, seeming to relax in her own turf. I live close, she reiterated, as though to assure them they needn't worry. But neither man showed any inclination to leave her alone. They felt the need to ensure her safety to the very end, especially given the hostile vow the biker had hissed before departing. Sasha flicked a glance at Dwayne. So, you guys are, kind of famous. You do this for random people all the time? Her youthful curiosity flickered alongside a sense of awe, even after all she'd experienced. Dwayne managed a quick laugh, though it was tinged with modesty. We're just people, he said with a shrug. We saw someone in trouble. We stepped in. That's something anyone should do. Vin cut in with a wry smirk. We've played heroes on screen, but real life is a bit more unpredictable. His gaze roamed the quiet street, half expecting a black motorcycle to zoom around the bend. We couldn't just watch you stand up to a bully like that without having your back. The sincerity in his tone melted any formalities. Sasha nodded, clearly touched by their willingness to help. Sometimes people just watch, you know, she said softly. They see bad things happen and pretend it's not their business. Guess that's how these creeps keep winning. A hush settled over them, each pondering how easy it was for wrongdoing to flourish when no one intervened. The asphalt stretched out ahead, baking under the pitiless sun. A couple of children whizzed by on bicycles, laughing and carefree, reminding Sasha of the normal joys of being a kid. Joys that, for a moment, had been jeopardized by one man's arrogance. She clenched her cast, a fleeting grimace crossing her face as she remembered how he'd nearly put hands on her. If not for these two stepping up, they reached a petite row of houses, each with a narrow yard. Some boasted neat flower beds, while others had overgrown hedges, hinting at the varied personalities that resided within. Sasha pointed at a small single-story place with a white picket fence. "That's me," she said. Indeed, it looked cozy. Potted plants on the porch, a cheerful wind chime tinkling in the mild breeze. Mom should be home from work by now, probably worried. She sounded relieved. The presence of her mother, the comfort of home, formed a bulwark against the day's troubles. As they neared Sasha's house, a mild sense of triumph undercut the scorching day. Crisis averted and a courageous teen safely escorted. Vin Diesel popped open the small iron gate that bordered her front lawn, letting Sasha enter first. "Appreciate what you did," she said over her shoulder, her voice warming with genuine gratitude. "If you guys ever need a cameo from a sassy teen with a broken arm, I'm your girl." A flicker of humor laced her grin, an attempt to brush away the residual tension. Dwayne Johnson chuckled, the lines of worry smoothing from his forehead. "We'll keep that in mind," he joked. "Heal up soon. Maybe you can do your own stunts next time." Sasha laughed softly, the tension in her posture finally melting under the protective umbrella of her own home. She fiddled for a moment, rummaging in her pocket for a house key. The beep of a car passing on the street punctuated the quiet, a normal slice of suburban life reasserting itself after the day's drama. Eventually, the front door swung open, revealing an older woman, Sasha's mother presumably, wearing scrubs, as though returning from a hospital or clinic shift. Her weary face brightened with alarm upon seeing strangers, but Sasha quickly eased her worry. "It's okay, Mom. These are the guys who helped me out at the store," she said, setting her soda on a small table near the entrance. The woman's eyes flicked from Sasha's turquoise cast to the imposing frames of Dwayne and Vin, relief washing over her. "Thank you," she breathed, stepping forward with trembling sincerity. "I heard you stopped something bad from happening. I, I can't thank you enough." Vin waved off the praise gently. "She's the brave one," he said, letting the heat of the day remind him to keep conversation short. "We just didn't want to bully hurting anyone." Dwayne nodded in agreement. Sasha's mom insisted they come inside for a moment, at least to step out of the sun. While they politely declined an extended visit, they accepted a few minutes in the shade of the foyer, sipping cold water from plastic cups. The swirling air of the house's AC felt like a blessing on their sun-baked skin. As they stood there, Sasha gave an abridged version of events, her moral stand at the store, the intimidation from the biker, and the eventual rescue by the two action stars. Her mother's expression fluctuated between horror and relief. "I always told her to speak up for what's right," she murmured, half to herself. "But I never imagined it would lead to something like this." She turned her gaze upon Dwayne and Vin. "You left a mark on her. She won't forget your help." They gently assured her that the police were likely to handle the man, but Sasha's mother still seemed uneasy. Realizing they could do little more at that moment, they politely took their leave, stepping back out onto the baking porch. Sasha's mother watched from the threshold, eyes shining with gratitude and lingering concern. Meanwhile, Sasha herself gave a final wave. The turquoise cast an unmistakable symbol of resilience. "Don't worry about me," she said, setting her jaw stubbornly. If they come back, I'll call the cops. Or handle it myself, she added with a wry grin. Vin Diesel met her grin with one of his own. We believe you, he replied, but hopefully they've learned their lesson. Dwayne dropped a quick nod and offered a thumbs up. Stay fierce. A sense of mutual respect pulsed in the heavy air as they parted ways. By the time the front door closed behind Sasha, both men felt the day's tension morphing into a subdued afterglow of relief. Crisis resolved, at least for now. Yet as they walked away from the picket fence, a small voice of caution tugged at them. The store scenario had ended abruptly. The biker's threat at the door, "This isn't over," echoed uncomfortably in their heads. They both knew how grudges could fester in men who felt humiliated or challenged. For all they had done, they couldn't remain Sasha's guardians indefinitely. Each had a busy life, a schedule that seldom paused. A pang of worry gnawed at them. Would the biker actually come back? Perhaps they should trust the local authorities to handle it. But what if that trust was misplaced? In the hours that followed, Dwayne Johnson and Vin Diesel found themselves longing for the typical routine they'd expected. A post-workout meal, maybe some light errands, and an evening to wind down. Instead, they discovered an undercurrent of adrenaline that refused to subside. The city's architecture drifted past them as they returned to the commercial district, its storefronts and wide avenues bleached by the relentless sun. People bustled about, oblivious to the recent confrontation that had nearly turned violent in a convenience store. The normalcy of it felt jarring, a world uninterested in small acts of heroism or last-minute rescues. They pulled into a modest diner, the sign reading Lisa's Kitchen, hoping to refuel. The AC inside was a relief, and they settled into a vinyl booth, the seats squeaking under their weight. A few heads turned, recognizing the famous duo, but the day's exhaustion prevented much fanfare. Dwayne pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaling. That girl, Sasha, he began, still can't shake the feeling that guy might try something else. Vin tapped the table with a muscled index finger. Me too. Some men can't swallow their pride. Being shown up by a kid and losing face in front of a crowd, that can push them to do something reckless. A hush descended on their conversation, momentarily replaced by the clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversation from other booths. Neither man was naive to the ways of street bullies and petty criminals who saw retaliation as the only way to salvage wounded pride. They'd encountered it in big cities, small towns, and even on film sets with overzealous fans. Danger often lurked just beneath the veneer of civility. When the waitress, a friendly brunette named Shelley, approached, they each ordered a platter of protein-heavy foods. She recognized them, of course, but politely withheld any mention of their fame. After she left, Dwayne offered a tight smile. Maybe we should head back toward her neighborhood after we eat, just to be sure. That's a bit of an overreach, though, right? Vin considered. Could be overkill. Could be exactly what's needed. But let's not become stalkers. We told her we trust her, and we gotta trust she'll call the cops if anything happens. The logic was sound, yet both men wore uneasy expressions as Shelley returned with large glasses of iced water. The conversation paused while they gulped thirstily, welcoming the cold that cut through the leftover dryness in their throats. The lunch arrived, a high-protein spread of chicken breasts, brown rice, and steamed vegetables. They ate in pensive silence, occasionally sharing glances that hinted at ongoing concern. Even the typical small talk about upcoming film projects or gym routines felt forced, overshadowed by the day's events. When Shelley brought the check, they thanked her, leaving a generous tip. They stepped back into the scorching afternoon, blinking against the punishing glare. Another mundane half-hour passed as they visited a gym supply store, stocking up on supplements. Yet all the while, their minds circled back to Sasha. The sense of foreboding refused to fade. Dwayne slid behind the wheel of their borrowed SUV, inhaling deeply, then turned to Vin. I can't just let it go, he admitted, voice tinged with reluctance. At least a quick drive by her neighborhood, see if it's all good. Vin nodded in acceptance, relief that the same logic weighed on both their minds. So they navigated the city's grid, eventually finding themselves back on those quieter streets. The sun had begun its slow dip, painting the sky with oranges and pinks. Shadows lengthened across sidewalks, and the temperature eased from scorching to merely hot. As they cruised near Sasha's street, everything seemed serene. A father tossing a basketball with his toddler in a driveway, an older lady watering her flowers. Nothing out of place. No roaring motorcycle, no group of men in black jackets. For a moment, they parked inconspicuously across the road from Sasha's corner house, its white picket fence and neat yard looking exactly as earlier. In the distance, a cicada's whine buzzed in the thickening twilight. The curtains in what must be Sasha's living room were drawn, the glow of a TV or lamp shaping the window frame into a warm rectangle. All was calm, almost too calm. Dwayne Johnson exhaled, letting the tension dissolve from his shoulders, though some residual alertness kept him perched on the edge of his seat. "Seems quiet," he said, voice hushed as though not to disturb the suburban silence. Vin Diesel sat in the passenger seat, gaze scanning the perimeter. "Yeah, no sign of them or any trouble." A flicker of relief curved his lips. Maybe it was just talk, and the cops caught up with him. The logic was reassuring. The store manager might have given the police the security footage, so the biker could have gotten spooked. But as night steadily draped the neighborhood in a cloak of shadow, they grew restless. Standing guard unannounced outside a teenage girl's home was hardly a normal activity for two major celebrities. After nearly 20 minutes with no sign of disruption, Dwayne turned the ignition. "Guess we can rest easy," he said, pulling the SUV away from the curb. "We'll head out, get some proper rest." Vin nodded, staring once more at the softly lit windows. He silently prayed that they wouldn't be needed again. They hadn't driven 3 blocks before a shape emerged on the side mirror, the faint silhouette of motorcycles creeping along an adjacent street. Dwayne's chest tightened. "You see that?" he whispered. Vin turned, glimpsing the silhouettes as they wove behind parked cars, their dim headlights overshadowed by the street lamps. "Could be random," he began, but a second look confirmed it was at least 2 bikes, moving slowly as though searching for something. Or someone. A spike of tension hit both men. "We can't just ignore this," Dwayne decided. Without waiting for an objection, he swung the SUV around, turning into the labyrinth of residential lanes. The motorcycle lights flickered, casting elongated shadows across hedges and mailboxes. "They're heading near Sasha's place," Vin observed, a threat of urgency creeping into his usually steady tone. The men felt their hearts pound. The day's uneasy sense of fate returned in a rush. The biker from earlier, the one Sasha confronted, had made it clear he felt humiliated. Perhaps he'd rallied friends, determined to prove no teenage girl or pair of good Samaritans could undermine him. If so, the precarious peace around Sasha's home was about to shatter. Dwayne clenched the wheel, face grim. "We gotta intercept them." They took a shortcut through a narrower back road, a route gleaned from the earlier exploration, aiming to circle around and approach Sasha's house from the opposite direction. The engine rumbled with subdued power. Every second felt like an hour. Finally, they emerged onto the main street that led to Sasha's block. A line of street lamps lit up the road, revealing the silhouettes of 4 men dismounting their motorcycles near a small park. Exactly as the men had feared, they were distinct from the earlier group, reinforcements, bigger, rougher in build. The repeated motif, heavy boots, black leather, malicious intent radiating from their postures. Vin scoured the scene. "They're heading toward that park," he muttered, voice steady but tinged with alarm. "Sasha said her place is just past it. The puzzle pieces fit too well. The men intended to corner the girl if she stepped outside." Could they already have her pinned? The SUV's headlights swept across the grass. Dwayne parked discreetly behind a row of tall hedges. "We go on foot," he said, adrenaline spiking his system once more. Loud engine would tip them off. They hopped out quietly, making their way around the perimeter of the park. The hum of insects and an occasional bark from a distant dog colored the summer night, but no cheerful banter or typical suburban chatter. Instead, a hush of tension pressed down like a suffocating blanket. Rounding a cluster of oaks, they froze at the sight. Sasha, pinned and outnumbered by 4 men, including that all-too-familiar biker, who gripped her cast-bound arm in a vice-like hold. The poor girl's face twisted in pain, but fury still glowed in her eyes. The men, bigger than the earlier ones, ringed Sasha like a predatory circle, leaving her no path of escape. She bit her lip, refusing to cry out, yet the anguish in her features, especially around the turquoise cast, was blatant. The biker from the store, presumably the ringleader, snarled something about teaching her a lesson. His cohorts, a tall, wiry figure with scars tracing his jawline, a stocky brute with broad shoulders, and a mustachioed giant whose expression boasted utter cruelty, stood ready to pounce. Danger crackled in the humid air. Without a heartbeat of hesitation, Dwayne Johnson and Vin Diesel advanced, voices bellowing through the gloom. "Hey, get your hands off her!" Dwayne roared, each syllable underpinned by raw anger. The ring of men whipped around, shock momentarily flickering on their faces. The ringleader's sneer turned vicious. "You again?" he spat, recognition igniting pure hostility. "Didn't you learn from last time?" Vin didn't bother with banter. He sprang forward, hooking an arm around the ringleader's elbow, forcing him to release Sasha's cast. The big man twisted, an audible grunt of frustration escaping him. Meanwhile, Sasha stumbled free, hugging her injured arm and staggering backward. Freed from the immediate threat, she took in ragged gulps of air. Her gaze locked on the two men who had saved her before, and had come to do so again. But the other three bikers wasted no time. The tall, scarred man whipped out a short length of chain, swinging it in a deadly arc at Dwayne's midsection. Dwayne sidestepped, absorbing the blow with a well-timed block on his forearm. Pain jolted through him, but he ignored it, yanking the chain away with a powerful tug. The man stumbled forward. A rapid left hook from Dwayne blasted him off his feet, sending him sprawling into the dew-damp grass. Vin, simultaneously, was locked with the ringleader, who hammered fists like pistons. Vin's experience in choreographed fight scenes, replicated with real muscle here, allowed him to deflect or parry each strike. A savage uppercut from the biker glanced Vin's shoulder, but he pressed on, slamming a fierce elbow into the man's ribs. The hiss of breath that followed told of a bruised rib or worse. Regardless, the man refused to buckle, jabbing at Vin's torso with single-minded ferocity. For every blow Vin delivered, the man gave one back, until Vin pivoted around, hooking the man's neck into a makeshift choke that brought him to his knees. The stocky brute and the mustachioed giant rushed in tandem, bounding for Dwayne. The giant brandished a collapsible baton, flicking it open with a metallic snap. He slashed it downward, aiming for the back of Dwayne's head. Dwayne twisted just in time, throwing a backward elbow that connected with the giant's chest. The man grunted, staggering. Meanwhile, the stocky brute lunged low, trying to tackle Dwayne around the waist. That might have worked on a smaller adversary, but Dwayne was a mountain of muscle. He anchored his stance, grabbed the brute by the collar, and leveraged him off the ground. Then he delivered a punishing slam, the stocky man's back hitting the grass with a heavy thump. The giant recovered enough to jab his baton at Dwayne's side. Dwayne hissed a moment from the impact, a blossoming ache radiating from his ribs. But adrenaline carried him through. With a determined snarl, he caught the baton mid-thrust, ripping it from the giant's grasp. The momentum threw the giant off balance. Dwayne followed through with a thunderous right hook to the jaw. The giant's eyes rolled, and he collapsed in a boneless heap. Meanwhile, Vin pinned the ringleader fully, leaning his forearm across the man's windpipe. "Still want to teach that lesson?" he growled, sweat dripping from his temple. The man attempted to spit out a curse or a threat, but could only gag, pinned as he was. Eventually, his body went limp in a sign of partial surrender. Vin jerked his arm away, allowing the man to gasp for air. Within scant minutes, the four bikers lay strewn across the park's lawn, unconscious, moaning, or too dazed to fight. Silence invaded the humid night, broken by the ragged breathing of combatants and the hum of distant traffic. Under the pale glow of a nearby streetlight, Sasha stood trembling in relief rather than fear. She cradled her turquoise cast, tears welling in her eyes, though not from weakness, more from the raw emotional toll of nearly being brutalized twice that day. Dwayne Johnson stepped forward, offering a steadying arm. "You okay, kid?" he asked, voice tempered with concern. Sasha nodded, swallowing a knot of emotion. I'm fine," she managed, blinking away tears. "Thank you. Again." Her cast had a fresh bruise around it, but at least it wasn't rebroken. The lumps of incapacitated biker around them suggested these men wouldn't be a threat tonight. Possibly never again, given the fury that had ended with them face down on the turf. Vin Diesel scanned the perimeter. We should call the cops. Let them handle the aftermath. Sasha exhaled shakily. My house is right there, she said, nodding beyond the row of hedges. I can call from inside. But the night wasn't done surprising them. Barely had she spoken when the wail of sirens snaked through the silence once more, a sure sign that neighbors had heard the altercation. Indeed, swirling blue and red lights soon illuminated the edges of the park, giving the battered men an almost surreal luminescence. Within moments, two police cruisers careened to a halt, doors flung open. Officers spilled out, weapons drawn, demanding, "Freeze! Hands in the air!" Everyone complied. Dwayne and Vin raised their hands, stepping away from the downed bikers. Sasha also lifted her free hand, face pale but composed. With practiced caution, the police approached, scanning the scene of four incapacitated men. One officer, a tall woman with the name tag, Lieutenant Carter, recognized the battered men from a prior alert that day. Her expression mingled exasperation with relief. What happened? Carter barked, gaze flicking from Sasha to the two towering men. Before Dwayne or Vin could respond, Sasha spoke with surprising clarity. They attacked me. My friends stopped them. The word friends made both men glance at her with a measure of gentle pride. Indeed, after everything, they had become her de facto protectors. Another officer, smaller in stature but exuding confident authority, knelt by the unconscious ringleader, feeling for a pulse. The battered man groaned, stirring but nowhere near coherent. Carter muttered, We've had calls about a biker group harassing folks around here. She looked at Sasha with genuine concern. You sure you're not hurt? Sasha shook her head, hugging her cast close. They twisted my arm, but I'll be okay. These guys saved me. She gestured at Dwayne and Vin. Again. That final word, softly spoken, struck a chord with the onlooking officers. They realized this wasn't just a spontaneous scuffle, but the second rescue of the same day. Carter sighed heavily. We'll need statements from all of you. Let's get these punks into the cruisers. Bring paramedics if needed. As officers dragged the half-conscious men onto their feet, or in some cases carried them, the ringleader spat an oath of revenge, glaring at Sasha. His bravado rung hollow. The cops shoved him into a cruiser, ignoring his curses. Another officer gently ushered Sasha aside, just to confirm she truly was uninjured. Dwayne and Vin stood near, arms folded, scanning the scene with stoic calm. It felt like a moment of déjà vu. Once again, the relentless lights of police vehicles, the hush of neighbors peeking from behind curtains, and the background hum of cicadas. Sasha was safe. The men who threatened her were subdued, cuffed, and destined for a jail cell. For Dwayne and Vin, the relief of a job well done warred with the exhaustion of multiple fights. They exchanged weary glances. At least now, maybe the menace was definitively ended. When the final cruiser pulled away, loaded with four humiliated bikers sporting fresh bruises and battered pride, the sirens tapered into a distant whine. A calm hush settled over the block, the scent of cut grass blending with the lingering tang of hot asphalt. Lieutenant Carter approached Sasha, Dwayne, and Vin one last time. We've got your statements, and from the looks of it, these men won't see daylight for a while, she said, sliding her notepad into a belt pouch. I appreciate your cooperation and your assistance. Her gaze flicked over the battered forms the paramedics had briefly examined. Could have been a lot worse if you two hadn't stepped in. Vin Diesel gave a terse nod of acknowledgement. Just glad we were around, he replied, sincerity underlining his words. He rubbed a hand over the cut that had reopened on his arm, courtesy of the day's second scuffle. At some point, adrenaline would fade completely, and the aches would set in. That was tomorrow's problem. Dwayne Johnson turned his attention back to Sasha, who stood with the turquoise cast pressed to her side, an expression of mingled relief and lingering adrenaline. You're sure you're okay? He asked, voice gentle now that the threat had truly passed. She met his gaze evenly. Yeah, like I said, I'll be fine. At least my cast is still in one piece, right? Her attempt at humor broke the tension, eliciting a chuckle from Dwayne. Behind them, a few neighbors stepped onto their porches, curiosity etched in their faces. Some gave small waves of gratitude or murmurings that drifted on the night air. The sense that this close-knit community looked out for each other felt oddly comforting after the day's confrontation. Dwayne retrieved his phone, possibly checking for missed calls or any update from the store manager who had first alerted the cops. Meanwhile, Vin scanned the horizon. No sign of more adversaries. They had faced not just one, but two sets of bikers determined to prove a point. That point had shattered along with their illusions of invulnerability. One of the paramedics, a young woman named Rena, gingerly inspected Sasha's cast. "The brace seems okay, though there's some bruising around the wrist," she commented softly. Sasha endured a quick check, wincing only slightly. "All good," she insisted, and Rena nodded, satisfied. "Take it easy on that arm, though. Maybe see your doctor if the pain increases." As the paramedics packed up, Lieutenant Carter signaled her final departure. "I think we're done here," she said, giving a brief, respectful tilt of her head to Dwayne and Vin. "You two ever consider going into law enforcement?" A half smile played on her lips. Vin answered with a slight grin. "We already handle enough fights in our day jobs." Carter chuckled, then turned to Sasha, offering a paternal pat on her cast. "Stay safe, kid, but I guess you don't need me telling you that." She strolled off, heading to her cruiser, leaving a final swirl of red and blue reflection across the neat suburban lawns. Now it was just the three of them in the hush of an early night. Sasha hovered in her yard, the porch light hugging the facade of the house. The day had begun with a searing sun, advanced to a midday rescue, and ended in an evening showdown. Twice she had faced a man determined to humiliate her. Twice she'd been saved by two men who hadn't planned on playing real-life heroes. A swirl of gratitude, exhaustion, and realization glimmered in her eyes. She let out a quiet sigh, turning to them. "I don't even know how to thank you," she murmured. "You saved me. Twice. Didn't even know my name or anything." Dwayne gave a gentle smile, placing a reassuring hand on her uninjured shoulder. "Sometimes you don't need to know someone to help them," he said. "We just did what was right." Vin nodded, arms crossed. "Bravery goes both ways. You stood up for what was right in that store. Not many would." For a fleeting moment, they all simply stood there, letting the night breeze carry the faint sense of grass and far-off barbecues. Sasha's eyes glistened with something akin to hope, or maybe a new understanding that courage doesn't require age or muscle mass, just the will to speak up. She parted her lips as if to say more, then changed her mind, letting a small, thankful smile do the talking. With that, she headed inside, the door closing quietly behind her. Under the mild glow of the street lamp, Dwayne and Vin exchanged relieved glances. The events had taxed them, physically and emotionally, but there was a definite sense of closure. The bikers who threatened Sasha, both sets, were in custody. The day had tested them in unexpected ways, but they'd proven once again that standing up to bullies, no matter where or when, was worth every bruise. Finally, they turned, heading down the street to wherever they'd parked, forging ahead into the hush of the night. In a world where intimidation can silence the meek, let this story remind us the strongest sometimes need to step up for the vulnerable. Sasha taught us that a resilient spirit can come from the least likely places. A cast-wearing girl who refused to let a criminal steal and get away with it. Dwayne Johnson and Vin Diesel showed that real heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just wear gym clothes and carry a moral code in their hearts. If you were moved by this tale of raw courage, don't forget to like this post, subscribe to our channel, and tap the notification bell so you never miss another adrenaline-packed story. And let us know in the comments, what would you do if you found yourself in Sasha's shoes?